3, 2, 1. Just want to make sure I see it go live on YouTube. Until then. All right, we did it. It's live. All right, so everyone, welcome to our Christmas CoinMarketCap streaming week. This is the end of the first day, but we're going to be up here until Christmas. And today, right now, we're going to talk about the metaverse, Web 3.0, how to explain what this is to your friends and families over the holidays, perhaps good topic of conversation. But before we start, I just want to remind everyone watching that there's more to do than just watch us. If you go to coinmarketcap.com/Christmas, this whole week, if you watch and subscribe and refer people, you can win some Christmas cash prizes. Not very metaverse-like, Web 2.0 to Web 3.0. Anyway, coinmarketcap.com/Christmas. And for now, I'm Molly Jane. I'm CoinMarketCap's head of content. And with us, we have William and Jay. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about where you're from and why you're qualified to talk to me, why I'm qualified to even talk about the metaverse today with you all, Web 3.0.
Sure. I guess I can start. So William Quigley, I am currently the co-founder of Wax, which is a NFT-focused blockchain, actually the first. We launched it in 2017. We launched it after having spent many, many years helping in the buying and selling of video game virtual items. My partners and I started the first marketplace for buying video game virtual items back in the 90s. And then back in 2015, we built the biggest marketplace for skins. Skins are video game virtual items that are strictly cosmetic. They have no in-game utility. Skins are really a forerunner of NFTs. And so the principal revenue model of the metaverse is going to be NFTs. I think most people will be experiencing them, even if they're not crypto people, at some point in the near future. And so happy to talk all about what we think is coming and why it's exciting.
Great. You really have had a long experience then working with this, longer than me, longer than a lot of other people, maybe longer than Jay, I don't know.
Hey guys, for my end, Jay, Kurahashi, Sofue, probably longer than me, at least on the collectible side, with or without blockchain. But for my end, VP of Marketing at Ava Labs, we are the team building the Avalanche blockchain. So Avalanche is a layer 1 protocol that focuses on smart contracts. The biggest value proposition that I think stands out the most with Avalanche is transaction finality happens in under 1 second, thanks to the Avalanche consensus protocol. So with smart contracts, we're basically covering anything that can be enabled by that. Usually on the Web3 side, they're applications. They could be applications within decentralized finance, also could be within the NFT marketplace vertical, and then also metaverses as well, and kind of everything in between. And right now, as it stands, with Avalanche, we are focusing a lot and really shifting, or I guess not shifting necessarily, but kind of spreading our focus beyond just DeFi and NFTs, and also then seeing which applications really need highly performant blockchains. And there are likely use cases that simply don't exist yet just because of the limitations of the previous blockchains. And so really excited to see what happens in the next 6 months, but of course, year, 5 years, and so on.
So when is the first time both of you heard the word metaverse? Because for me, it was maybe, I think probably a month ago, and now we're having talks about it. So in your guys' both different experiences, when was the first time that concept was really brought up to you, solidified? This is the metaverse, now this is the next topic of conversation.
I'd say first, I have no idea. When the first time I ever heard it, I'm positive I have no idea. I'd say this is about the third iteration of the metaverse. I don't know when I first heard it. Maybe I'm an MMORPG guy. So what we think of as metaverse, for most people, if you're not an MMO, a massively multiplayer online role-playing game guy, you would not, you would look at some of these games today and say, oh, that environment and that experience looks a lot like what I hear the metaverse is going to be. So it's at least 15 years, because I know that when the term reared its head from some marketing person, I don't know, 9 months ago, which is too bad, because it was actually a pretty good word. Now it means utterly nothing. But I was like, okay, this is round 3. And we definitely will have iteration 4. It's not going to stop here.
What about you, Jay? Did you write it down in your calendar? Like, this is the day that DeFi summer was over, NFTs over, now it's metaverse. Do you remember when that happened?
Yeah, so I think I do agree with William about kind of the different iterations. I think that word has really evolved multiple times. I remember the earliest game I played that was similar, kind of Mist, I guess, was a little bit like that. And then maybe as it progressed, you had all these different companies like, I guess, like Second Life. That was another recent one, or fairly recent. But I think metaverses, in the context of our conversation, especially with Web3 backgrounds, it really means metaverses with the Web3 kind of backend. I think that's kind of what everyone's really excited about. No longer do you have this world that's controlled by one entity. You now have a world that can be controlled by multiple people, including us on the call here. So I think with the Web3 context, the first time I heard it, I remember was with Decentraland, I think was probably the earliest project. And that was back in 2016, 2017. The interesting thing was they were basically trying to implement their version of the metaverse on Ethereum. And this was, again, early days of Ethereum. So I remember I was on a panel this weekend, and I was asked, what's the one thing you got wrong? And the first thing outside of crypto, I said, well, COVID. That was something I definitely got wrong. And then the second thing, in the context of crypto, were metaverses, not in the sense of its viability, but just in the kind of the speed at which it was adopted. And I don't think we're at adoption at all, really, but in terms of how much attention it's gotten, I wouldn't really have predicted this amount of attention to things like Decentraland, Sandbox, I think is another one. And then a lot of these new NFT enabled games that are trying to create these worlds. So they're kind of starting from collectibles first and then creating the world, as opposed to some of these metaverse projects are more trying to figure out what the ecosystem looks like, and then basically auctioning off parts of their land and also creating the utility that makes the game fun.
I realized that the first time I heard the term was probably with Neil Stephenson, the science fiction whole universe, which is a lot different than how it's being used now, as you've said. And so a question I asked when we joined this Zoom is, what is each of if you guys could have like a 1-sentence definition of the metaverse? You know, is this the metaverse? I don't think this is the metaverse. Do you guys want to give it a shot? You know, someone said, put
1 sentence,
what's the metaverse?
I'd say no, absolutely not. Can't give you 1 sentence. I do think it's a nonsense phrase, right? So like my team and I, we never talk about the metaverse because it doesn't mean anything, because it means everything. But at a very basic level, it is the ability, it's a video game where you can bring in real world ideas and real world services. Could be a Zoom call. It could be a tokenized version of a real world physical product. Anything where you can integrate something that would not otherwise be in this 2-dimensional flat video game experience. And then the most important thing to me, and the reason I created WAX, is the ability to make money, the ability to have an economy that is not controlled by a damn overlord. You know, I've been in the video game industry for 30 years. And the problem with the video game industry, once we had virtual items, was that these items on our marketplaces could cost thousands of dollars. People wanted to trade them. They sometimes even wanted to use them. But almost every video game company on earth restricts their use. And they certainly don't allow real money trading. a term that has been around maybe for 20 years, which is, buying and selling video game virtual items for real money. That's almost impossible to do. And so you can have this game experience where you've got an avatar, it's a first person sort of look, and you are able to bring in your own items and sell your own items and build an economy where you can extract something from that without an Apple, a Google, a Facebook, a Microsoft telling you you're banned. So if you can go into a world, you can do whatever you want as long as you have the software to do it. You can make money, you can offer services, and that world is persistent, and no one can ban you. I'd say you're in a metaverse, but they don't exist yet.
Yeah, maybe for me, it's definitely the same, but maybe different, a different way of putting it. For me, with the metaverse, as it relates to Web3, it's effectively the world that we live in as actual people right now, translated in the digital world, with the rules that exist in that world, and those are defined just by the community, effectively. And you can still do the same things you do in the world in this digital instance. And that's where I think the economy starts coming into play. Because in the real world, you can be a shopkeeper, you can be an accountant. Those are all these things that exist because there are marketplaces and supply and demand of those services. So effectively, I think this new paradigm that we're kind of exploring with Web3 is really just having no, again, control with kind of a major authority to dictate what you can and can't do.
Yeah, and which means Facebook can't create a metaverse. Apple cannot create a metaverse. Amazon, Tencent, even Fortnite cannot create a metaverse because they own it, they control it, and they will ban you if you do something they don't want. And the thing that they don't want is you to do anything that limits or potentially harms their business model. So if you touch their business model, they will ban you. So that's for anybody on this stream, you're not in the metaverse if you can be banned, and for anyone who builds apps or has ever been in the video game and tried to monetize something in the video game, you can be banned. You probably have been banned. So that is a thing that we in the blockchain world are excited about. Creating a world where there will be rules, but there'll be community-driven rules. And really, your ability to create something important is limited by your imagination and your skills in software development. That's pretty much it. Now it sounds a lot like what I remember the internet to be back in the 90s, before there were, 10 global companies that basically could restrict you in almost every way. So the promise of this is enormous because we have a lot of imaginative people out there. And if you can do anything, and as long as there's an audience, it'll get viewed, and potentially you'll be able to make something valuable from it, make money off of it. That's a super exciting place to be. At some point, in the not too distant future, we'll have augmented reality as an overlay on this, and that will further improve and grow the amount of things that are possible. So those are, it's exciting as long as we can keep these blockchains open and permissionless.
Jake, what do you think about that? Do you agree that a company like Facebook can't create a metaverse, or do you think there's a possibility, sort of like the Bitcoin without blockchain, corporate, et cetera? Does that have a place in your opinion?
Yeah, I think maybe the vision that probably William and I share, based on even just the 5-10 minutes of talking, I don't think they could build the version that we're imagining. I think they can build it and brand it, and they can label it as such. That's what happens with blockchains too, if you think about it. If you think about permissioned blockchains, or just kind of not anything that's not permissionless, they still kind of enable that terminology. So in a permission sense, without interoperability, that's effectively just a hyper efficient, or maybe not even efficient, but just more just a database, I guess, effectively.
Mhm.
So that's where I think people can try, and I think there's space in the market just because of the way we operate. Anyone can innovate, and the market pretty much dictates what works and what doesn't. So I like with most things with centralized entities, I think we're going to have a pretty strong mix of purely Web3 experiences, and also those experiences that are hybrid, and then those that are completely not Web3 and branded as such. I think the unfortunate part is the users really only care about what works for them. They don't necessarily care so much about the philosophy or the ethos. I think that might change a little bit more as we kind of progress in the future, with also advocates really telling the story as it should be told. But I don't really see a world where it's going to be like, oh, well, because something's more decentralized than not, I'm going to pick that, even though the user experience is worse, right? So what I'm getting at is, you Web3 builders, we really need to focus on the UX. We also really need to move fast in the market, because you're basically competing with companies with huge balance sheets, a lot of headcount. So these team members can really kind of work together and push their products much quicker than maybe a bootstrap startup, for example. So I think it cannot exist in the definition that we're defining, but I think it will inevitably exist with kind of the context I gave.
Yeah, I would say, Facebook it'll be an app store. It's just an app store. You'll be bound by rules. And yeah, it's true. For a lot of people, that'll be perfectly fine. I mean, the app stores are popular. There'll be more surprises in true metaverses, because you're not competing against someone's business model.
So my next question has to do with, you mentioned like the UI UX. So I've played around with a few games. I played around with the Sandbox, with Axie Infinity, although that's not a metaverse right now. They're not trying to be, I don't think, because it's more of a play to earn. And I have noticed that I'm not a big gamer, but the games that I do play are just eons better and more interesting and more beautiful. And I'm wondering if you think that that's something that has a really steep learning curve for people to connect the blockchain with a game that is actually pretty, that makes people want to play it more. And if you think that's what's going to get people, that's what's going to make the metaverse, the way you guys are talking about it, exist in such a way, or how fast can that happen? I've asked a lot of questions. I think you can.
So yeah, but I get the general point, and it's very true. So it's now every technology that has come around for which games can be built, initially those people usually the people who built the latest previous technology say that's not a real game, right? So when PC games happened in the 80s, the arcade guys said those aren't real games. And then when browser-based games in the 90s happened, or in early 2000s, the PC guys said those aren't real games. And then mobile people came around, and then the browser people said, oh, those mobile games aren't real games. And then the first people that criticized the blockchain games or the mobile game people, they said those aren't really games. And I think to a great extent, the criticism is true initially. It's more a technology validation exercise. The very first mobile game that I played was Jamdat Bowling, which was basically just characters on a little Opera browser on a phone. It was pretty lame, but it was sort of a showcase of what's possible. Right now, it is, unless you apply the broadest definitions of a game, what we think of as games, these are not games. They're sort of DeFi mechanics, which allow you to do an activity, maybe buy an NFT, and then earn an in-game token, which you can then trade for another token, which maybe you can cash out in some way. That's where it is now. But I would say it's okay, right? Because in another year or two, you'll start seeing a lot more emphasis on entertainment, and the blockchain aspect of it will be there, but it won't be the only reason you're playing. If you take out the earn aspect of these games, is probably, you would have seen, you wouldn't have played them. right? They're kind of like whatever. But
No.
that always changes. Also, blockchain's a difficult concept to grasp. And how do you incorporate blockchain in a way where it adds to the entertainment value of the game? Right now, game developers are learning to do that. And so it is hard. The interfaces aren't great, but I'd say it's going to get much, much better. And the promise of being able to use your NFT in multiple games, which is just a promise now, is pretty cool. So a year, 2 years, these things will be a lot more fun than they are now.
Yeah, maybe with the UI focus here, I think the important clarification would be it doesn't necessarily have to be high fidelity in terms of graphics. I used to actually think that for some time, but I don't actually think that anymore because of the other kind of massively adopted games in Web 2, like Minecraft, for example. Those are just blocks. But what it does really well is it tells a story and it gives power to the actual player. At least from a user experience perspective. So you're basically a character, you walk around and you have this whole world and you can do whatever you want with it. It's kind of like how Legos really moved into the market by giving people the creativity to do whatever they want with their blocks. So I don't think it's about high fidelity, but I think it's about telling the story. What's the story that really resonates with you to make it fun? So being fun is actually probably the most important element of this kind of future metaverse. If you have something that's fun, then you have stickiness when it comes to the game. Something that makes you want to wake up in the morning and say, I need to log in for 2 minutes because I need to do X, Y, and Z task in the game, or I need to check in with my friends, or I need to complete a task or a quest or whatever it may be. So I think the stickiness is really important. Then once you have that set, then I think the value proposition will become clear if you have, I don't know, maybe I guess like interoperability in the metaverse. I think that's also perhaps a future topic that might become fairly important. And so when you have the let's say you have Metaverse A and you have a bunch of users and everyone's a big fan of it, I think the way to tell that story is then say, well, look at these in-game items. If you're, I don't know, if you're like a salesperson in the metaverse and you're selling a bunch of items, well, wouldn't it be amazing if you could actually go from this world and pick up all of your in-game items and go to a different world to try and test out to see if you could sell those items in a different world? And I think that kind of portability or that interoperability is how you kind of learn about the actual value proposition of it being open just through experience. So I think these are the types of actions that will likely make this kind of solidify this Web3 version of the metaverse, and people will understand it better. I think that's kind of what you need.
I'm kind of imagining bringing a Pokemon into my Animal Crossing world, something.
Yeah,
That's where
something like that.
That's my mind goes to first. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. There's a few audience questions I've been tracking. Let's ask one or two. The first one is from Fernando, and he says, what about the Sims NFT? Do you think that could be a new online world where you can do whatever you want and work for big brands in a store and earn money by hour in the real world? That sounds really boring, actually. If you're just like working as a salesman.
It sounds fun to me. I like that.
That's not play to earn, that's work to earn. Which you're right, not as fun, work to earn. Yeah, of course, any brand that has an audience in the physical world can experiment. That particular example, I don't know, doesn't sound too fun to me, but could be.
Yeah, I mean, I think with that question, Fernando is effectively describing a permissioned metaverse, I guess. One I guess caveat that I was also thinking about was big brands can actually play in the metaverse so long as they deploy it and relinquish all their control. I know that's a tiny nuance, but I realize that could actually exist, which is actually interesting to think about philosophically, I guess, at this state, because you don't know, like, is that a marketing opportunity? Maybe it could just be like a Facebook metaverse, but if it's owned by people, who knows? I don't know. If someone from a FANG company is listening in, you're free. That's some free alpha, I guess. But for like I guess the one thing also that stands out to me about entertainment, something that I've kind of shifted in my worldview in terms of what's fun in gaming is simulations. So if you think about some of the games like Farming Simulator, Truck Driver Simulator, you have a simulation for almost every single thing you could possibly do in the real world. Would I play 2-3 hours driving a semi truck pretending that I'm a truck delivery person? Probably not. But there is a fan base that exists that buys these types of games. So I think it's totally valid to have something like that. It probably wouldn't work for any of us here because I think we expressed that we're not interested in it. But for some people, there might be an opportunity.
I'm just thinking, I mean, I don't want to just say every buzzword possible in crypto right now, but would it be a metaverse run by a DAO if it was a brand, you know, as part of the DAO, making the decisions completely community based?
Yeah.
You just have to understand, you know, a brand, it's a business, right? And it has a business model, it has shareholders. And so, you know, the brands have to be a bit cautious, particularly if you're a video game brand, right? Because in general, the newest business model that happens in the video game world is adopted first by the indies, because the indies don't have a big business to put at risk. The last people to kind of modify whatever they're doing are going to be the people who have a great franchise in gaming, let's say, and then they're like, okay, I'll finally tip my toe in the water and see if I can keep my old business model going, but get some of the value from this new phenomenon. That is, you know, it's a tough dance. So hence why virtually all of the value, let's say in NFTs, have come from original content, not from brands. And virtually, I think all the games that are in the blockchain today, almost every one of them is original IP. You know, and it'll be a while before we see, you know, big brands, I think, really relinquish control. You know, it'll be a while. When many years ago, I was the CFO of the Walt Disney Company licensing division, and our you know, we were very controlling there, and you know, even today, you know, Disney's never sold an NFT. They sold digital stickers. I think there's it's an app called Vivi. They call them NFTs, but they're not NFTs. You can't actually remove them from the app. You can't trade them for real money. So I think at a very basic level, anyone on this stream who knows anything about NFTs knows you own them and you can trade them for other crypto or other real money. So if I take those two aspects of them away, that's not an NFT. And going back to what we talked about earlier, just, you know, sort of the hijacking of the term and then, you know, using it to market something, it's really not that thing. We've already seen it with NFTs, and I think we're going to see it with metaverses.
All right, so we have about 2 more minutes. So I'll just ask you guys to say, again, briefly, what you think will happen and what you're doing to interact more with this concept in the future. So quickly, I run my team meetings now in Gather, where you're little characters. You walk into a building, you go sit at your little table, put a plant down. That's my contribution to trying to figure out the metaverse. What are your guys, you know, metaverse resolutions for 2022?
By the way, I like VR chat. I think it's very cool, though we're not running meetings yet. Mine is preparing for the not distant future when affordable, pretty well designed, wearable, augmented reality glasses are here. That'll be late 2024, I think. Maybe early, maybe mid, but not before then. And that will lead to a gigantic increase in what people want to do within this video gaming / metaverse reality. And I think people will use them a lot more per day. And so that's what I'm preparing for with Wax. Wax has lots of transactions as it is, but they are going to massively grow when augmented reality NFTs get introduced into future metaverses.
I think on my side, maybe it's kind of more broadly speaking, but I'm trying to stay as early as possible. I know that's easier said than done, but just using the application. So I've used Gather in Avalabs too. We used it for at least on the engineering team. I'm on the marketing function, so I kind of chime in and play. I think they have like a blackjack table in one of the worlds or something. Yeah, exactly. So you just testing it, really, then reflecting to yourself, how do you feel about that interaction? Is this something that's actually fun? Is this something that you can see as viable future? Those are the questions I ask. And I think to your point, William, about some of the hardware side of things, I think that's also fascinating too. I think the fascinating part is one of the biggest VR headsets out in the market is again owned by Facebook. So I think there is also plenty of opportunities for other companies to come through. And I think the ones that merge hardware and software and these experiences will ultimately have the better advantage in the market.
Yeah.
All right. Well, and I want to go get myself some VR glasses. I've never tried them before. You guys have inspired me.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you guys so much for joining. This was a fascinating conversation. Honestly, you've really cured me from my jet lag now. And again, for anyone watching, I got to plug coinmarketcap.com/Christmas, where you can go subscribe to our channel. Obviously, I think you can find both William and Jay on Twitter. I looked at your Twitters before this. You guys are both good tweeters. Definitely give them a follow. And happy holidays for all that you celebrate. And thank you guys so much for coming on.
Thank you.